Hi everyone, we're going to do a quick flash image gallery. So let's go ahead and get started. First start off, make sure you have the stage size you want. I'm just going to make this a little more interesting, and I'm going to make my stage color black instead. So we'll just do that. And I need to import some images. I have two sets of images. So let's go to File, Import, and I'm going to just import them to the library for now. And here's my folder. I have two versions of each image. I have a big image and I have a thumbnail image. Now I'm going to import them all. Now it's very important, before you bring any images into Flash, you need to do a little work beforehand. You need to optimize your images for this particular gallery. We can look and see that our stage size is 800 by 600, and that might be whatever you want it to be, but none of our large images should be bigger than 800 by 600. If you just take a photo out of a camera, a lot of them now are, huge megapixel amounts of cameras, so you get really high resolution images. Well, we don't need them to be that big. They're going to be bigger than the stage, and you're going to have to scale them down. The problem is the file that you import has a certain size to it, and that's going to go into your library, so really it's best to optimize your images first before bringing in. And then you'll want to make a thumbnail size version of them too. So let me go to the library. So what we are going to do is, let's create a few layers here. I'm going to have an action script layer at the top. We will do some labels as well, and I'll put that right under action script. We will also have the large image. And if I could type this right, large image, there we go. And we're going to have our thumbnails. So what we can do is we can go ahead and mark our labels for where things are going to be. So we can do properties and make sure you have your labels keyframe selected in frame 1, and we will call this image 1. I'll just go down to maybe frame 20. I'm kind of arbitrary on that. I'm going to right click here. I apologize, the menu is a little bit off screen, but I'm going to right click and insert blank keyframe. So then I can do another label, image 2, and then I'll come out to 40, right click, insert blank keyframe, and image 3. And I'll go ahead and just run some frames out to frame 60 so I can read that. So right click, insert frame. That'll take us out to here, and we can see all the text for our labels. Let's see. We're gonna start this with a image 1. We have some nice concert photos here. Now there's different kind of layouts. The kind of gallery we're going to do is the kind where there's a large image always present, and then the thumbnails will be somewhere on the screen, and as you click the thumbnails, the big image will change. So we're going to start this movie with this large image. We're going to start with image 1. They'll see when they start the image. Now you could have, sometimes it's nice to maybe have a starter image that maybe has a logo, or it says please click a thumbnail below or something like that. And that can just be the start you out, and then when the user starts to click, then it'll swap images. So it's sometimes nice to have that starter image, or you could just start with like an image 1 there. So now we want all of our thumbnails to be on the stage. So now I have these little versions. These are probably almost too little, because you can almost, it's kind of hard to even see what they are. But nevertheless, we'll go ahead and bring them down here. Now if you want to align these or distribute these, select them all, and we have a window align panel, and so we can make sure those are straight, and we can distribute those so they're the same spacing. Go ahead and close that panel, and I'll just kind of put these in the center. So it'll be important to, we're going to treat these little thumbnails as buttons. Now we don't have to necessarily, well, it does need to be, it has to have a name. These instances have to be named. So they need to be converted to a symbol. And since they are acting as buttons, we might as well just make them buttons. So let's go, we can right click or go modify, convert to symbol. Make sure your type is button. And we'll just say, you could say thumbnail 1 or thumbnail button 1. Or I'm just going to say button 1 for simplicity here. And that's an instance of button 1. And that, if we look in the library, that's what it's called, button 1. And we do that for each one. We convert it to a symbol. It's not the instance name, rather, that's button 1. It's the symbol is called button 1. It says it is an instance of button 1. We actually do need to give it an instance name as well for the action script. Usually I like to try to make that a different name than what the button is, just because the script can kind of get messed up if you sometimes use the same names for things. So I might just say btn1 instead there. So the next one we will modify, convert to symbol, or oops, I hit the wrong thing there. I put convert to bitmap. 1 second. Let's try that again. Modify, convert to symbol, button, and this symbol will be called button2, and we'll make the instance name btn2. And the instance is what we use in code. The last one, modify, convert to symbol, button, we'll call this button3, and the instance name will be btn3. So now all of our buttons are there. Now this might look familiar. We're going to do with this exactly what we would do if we had like a little website or a mini site with navigation. I mean, in that case, these, instead of these buttons being images, they might just be text, home, about, contact page, whatever links you have on your page. And when you click them, it jumps to different places in your timeline and changes the page. So really it acts the same way as like a navigation for a website or an application. We are going to go ahead and put in our large images where we want them to be. It looks like I wasn't paying attention when I added this one, and it went in my action script layer. So to move that out of that layer into another one, you can just go edit, cut, and I'll go to my large image layer, and I want it to go right back where I had it because I had it nice in place, so I can do paste in place, and it sticks it right back there. Then I'll move to frame 20. And I want these images to be in the exact same spot, so I'm going to do a little trick here. Let's right click, and I'm going to insert a keyframe. And when you do that, instead of a blank one, we're just going to insert a keyframe. Sorry, that's off screen. What it does is it just duplicated what I had in this one before, but we now have a new keyframe of it. Let me show you one more trick. Also, another way to duplicate a keyframe. Make sure the one you want to copy is selected here. Hold the Option button on your Mac, or if you have a PC, hold the Alt button. Hold that, click and drag down to here, and it actually did the same thing. It made a duplicate copy. Then I'm going to run this out to here, right click, insert frame. Now, we still have the same image on every scene here. We want to change that. So we're going to use what's called the symbol swap. So select the image, make sure you got it selected on stage, on image 2. And in your properties, there's a button called swap. We'll hit that, and your dialog comes up, and you can swap that symbol out with any other symbol. Or looks like we're swapping the bitmap. Oh, sorry about that. Looks like I have a bitmap. Oh yeah, bitmaps are fine. Usually you can do swaps for symbols, but we actually didn't change these graphics into symbols, but that's fine. They don't really need to be necessarily. So let's just do a swap, and that's going to swap the graphic rather than the symbol. But that swap button works for symbols quite nicely. So image 2, we pop that in, And notice that it's all in the same place and everything. That's kind of why I'm doing the swap. And it's kind of nice to get it in the same spot. Swap, and we'll put image 3 big. And I sized all those images the same, which I think looks kind of nice. You wouldn't necessarily have to do that. Sometimes you have landscape and sometimes you have portrait, so you might have different kinds of things. But usually having some kind of consistency makes for a nicer product. So, yeah, I wasn't paying attention again on where these thumbnails went. They went into the ActionScript layer. I was just dumping stuff on stage. So let's edit, cut those, and put them in the right layer, thumbnails. Edit, paste in place, and it puts them all there. And we want these thumbnails to be accessible the entire time. So let's go to the very end, right-click, insert frame, and now they're present in the entire timeline. Now if we test this movie, it's just running down the timeline and looping. So it's jumping from image to image. So we want to stop and we want to add the code for navigation. So in the very first frame, we'll add some ActionScript. We're going to stop, and that's going to stop our movie. So for this movie, actually all the code we need will go into frame 1. So we don't need it in multiple frames. All the code and functions we need will create right in frame 1. So we need to make event listeners for each button, for each thumbnail button. So button 1 is what I called the first one, and we're going to add event listener. And again, event listeners are functions that make you pay attention to the button essentially, and we're going to have it listen for a mouse event, specifically a click. And so when that button instance is clicked, we're going to call a function, and we'll just call it button1 go. That sounds like a good function name. Be anything you want it to be, and semicolon. Now we need to do this for each button. So button 2, I'm just going to copy paste to speed up the process here. And let's copy this whole line too. But we need to change a couple things. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. We're going to call different functions for each button. Let's add a little bit of commenting too, which is a good practice. So button event listeners listening for click. Then all we have to do is create each one of these functions that we're going to call. So we have function btn1 go, and let's see, event mouse event. It's kind of saying what it's going to be looking for. Void means it doesn't return anything. Functions can return stuff, but that's a little more advanced right now. And so inside of our function, when button 1 is pressed, we simply want to go to and stop. And we have our frame labels. We could just put a number here, go to and stop 20, but frame labels are a good idea. So, because if we rearrange stuff later, if we use frame labels and you've moved things around, you don't have to change the numbers. The frame labels will stay the same. So button 1, go to and stop, image 1. And that's what our label down here was. And notice for all this code, most of what I've typed here is very case specific. So these M's have to be capitalized. Your image 1 has to be exactly how you have it here. Your instance names, if you have it all lowercase, then it has to be the same in the code. So that's important. I'm going to copy this function to save time and change this to button 2, our button 3 function, and we'll go to and stop image 2, and we'll go to and stop image 3. Really, that's all the code we have to it. So let's run it and see what we got. I'm testing the movie by just hitting Command Return on my Mac, or on a PC, Control Enter, and that will test your movie. So it paused for us nicely, and we can click around and it basically jumps It does go-tos and stops from each thing depending on which button I press, and we have our simple gallery. You'll notice too that if you test the movie, we start on this the first image. If we click on the first image, it goes to and stops the first image, so you don't really notice anything, but it also doesn't really harm anything, so works out pretty well. So now I'm going to continue with this and try a different, more advanced way of doing it. But this is your kind of your simplest gallery. Now these thumbnail images could be on the side, they could be on the top, they could be inside of a nice interface of some kind. You might have some kind of framing around your large images. There's a lot you can do with it. So feel free to stop the movie now if you want to just do this kind of gallery, but let's try a different one. Sometimes you'll see galleries where the page is full of thumbnails. You click the thumbnail and the image will actually pop up either in a window. Light boxes kind of do that. So either in a window or maybe even full screen. So let's sort of kind of imitate what that would look like. I'm going to use some of what I have here already. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click in frame 1 in the action script layer and hold shift and click the very last frame here so that I select, let me try that again, select everything, and I'm going to move all this stuff down to about frame 10 it looks like. So now I have all this empty stuff in the beginning, and what I'm going to do this time is let's actually drag our thumbnails, just click this single keyframe. Let's drag our thumbnails back to 1, and here let's right click, insert blank keyframe. So I only want the thumbnails now to be in this first part of the timeline. Afterwards all we're going to have is our large images. Let's work on our large images first. Like I said, you could just have it come up here. Now what's nice is you could actually add text to this as well. You might create another layer and have text saying what we're looking at here, which would be nice. But we could actually use our transform tool here. Move my transform point to the corner here. And I could sort of get something so full screen. Now I didn't really plan for it to do it this way but in advance, but it's ideal to get, you know, set, if you're going to do full screen, set this to be, you know, make your images the size of what your screen's going to be. But I won't do totally full screen. Let's keep it just large here like that. So we have that one. I'll have to do it for each one of these. And I'm going to be, just for time's sake, I'm not going to worry about getting them to be the exact same size, but that would be ideal to make them look nice. So now we have our big images. So here's our thumbnails. Now in this case, like I said, we might have some other kind of, you know, your thumbnails can be bigger in this case. And these should be sized. Now scaling up, you could kind of tell that they're not looking good because we take a small image and we're stretching it out. So size your thumbnails to whatever size you want to do, but on this, you could almost call this like a home page. So you could have text, you could have some information, you can have whatever you want, you can arrange your thumbnails however you want, that kind of thing. So these are still all set up as buttons, and we'll want to do it like that, with button instance names for our code. And really, the code we've done already will work for this. So actually, I moved the code up to frame 10. Let's click and grab that and move that back here. So in frame 1, when our buttons show up on screen, we're going to call these different functions. So if we hit button 1, we're going to go to image 1. If we hit button 2, we go to image 2. And that's all going to work pretty much the same way as we did before. We're going to stop and wait at the beginning. So let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. So now we have our larger thumbnails. If you click one, it's going to go to the different place in the timeline. And you'll notice that now I can't get back. I have no way of getting back at this point. So we need to have some kind of back button. So I'm just going to create a new layer and drag this down, and I'll just call that back button layer. And for all, we don't need that in the first where our thumbnails are, we just need it where the large images are. So I'm going to right click, insert a blank keyframe. So let's make a back button. So in this blank keyframe where our images start, let's, I'm going to do something real simple here. So I'm just going to draw a shape. Now this would probably be better to be like a back arrow or something more fancy, or something that says back, text maybe. So I'm just going to draw this little thing that'll be for going back. Let's modify, convert to symbol, and we will call this our back button, and we'll make that a button as well. One thing that's nice about these buttons too is if you go into them, you have up, over, down, and hit state, so it's real easy to add like rollovers and things like that. I won't do that for now. I'll just leave them as the basic button. Now we actually want to have different button instances. We want to have different back buttons for each page. So I'm going to right click here, and we have insert keyframe that duplicates it. We could try that Alt or Option button again and click and drag one. Whatever your method is fine. Now there are other ways to do a gallery like this where we'd actually only create one back button. But I'm trying to do this in a way that is very straightforward and easy to understand. So there's more efficient ways to do this, but this will get the job done for today. So we need to name each back button. So we'll just say back BTN1, or let's kind of keep how we did before, back BTN1, that'll work. This one, let me grab it, back BTN2, and this one, let me grab it, back BTN3. Then we'll need to, one other thing at the start here, we're going to have to give this like a name, a label, so we can just call this one home. Now then, on each, we need to add separate code on each of the pages here. So you can go insert timeline, blank keyframe, or we can right click as we've been doing. And we're going to do some code. So here we're going to use our button and add an event listener to that. And then we have mouse event. We'll be looking for a click. And when we click button 1, we're going to call a function called go back. Now let me copy this so we can reuse that later. We haven't written this function go back, and we're actually not going to write it here because we are going to reuse the function go back for all of these buttons. But we do need to make event listeners for each button. So move down the timeline, right click, insert blank keyframe. Now we have a new place to put code. Notice each of these places where we put code, a little A pops up at the keyframe. Paste, and I'm just going to change back button 2 to look for that. Move down the timeline, right click, insert blank keyframe. This one needs to be back button 3. Like I said, all the functions are going to do go back. So now we just have to write that go back function. So we go back to the very frame 1 because we'll just declare this function from the get-go. Oops, actually I've put this code in. I paused the movie and typed it, but here's what we have. You'll want to type function, and then the name is go back. It's a mouse event type of function, and when we call the go back function, when those buttons are pressed, we go to and stop at this, not start, but home. And that will take us back. Now I think we'll be in good shape here. We can test our movie. Alright, no errors. We can click. We got our big image, but now we have our button over here. Our hand changes to show, our cursor changes to a hand to show that's the button. If I click that, it goes back. Now it's best to try this on every one just to make sure you don't have any mistakes, and the thumbnail you click on ends up the right image that you're supposed to go to. That's all good to check. So everything's working. I do want to show you one thing real quick. What happens if we have some kind of coding error? Maybe we type this wrong, something happens. What Flash does by default, and I don't really know why they do this, but it just runs your movie from beginning to end. Like you can't work it like you're supposed to. It just runs, and you're like, why doesn't it stop? What is going on here? And that is no good. Now you might have noticed another window that popped up when I did this. This compiler window popped up. Now this might show up in a different place depending on where what you have, but what it does is a lot of times it'll give you the line number. This says line 6 is a problem. Sometimes it doesn't always quite tell you where to go, and you kind of have to figure it out, and it can be a little bit tricky sometimes. But this is saying I sort of got a problem in line 6, access of undefined property button F1. It doesn't know what to do with that because that should be button 1, which is our button instance name. So that's what happens if you have some kind of error. So that's gallery method 2. Let me show you one more method. Now this method uses a movie clip to jump around. For this example, let's kind of go back to what we did with the other one. So let's I'm going to move this batch of code to frame 10 here, and that's going to replace that. And then I'm going to actually remove all these frames so we can kind of go back to what we had. So right click, remove frames, and we're kind of back to this scenario. I'm going to, let's see, we will deal with this in a minute. Let's move this here. And we're not going to need a back button this time. In fact, we aren't going to need most of this, so let's right click. We could almost kind of start over. In fact, why don't we just do that for simplicity's sake? We'll start with a fresh everything. Let's see, let's clear this out. You could just start a new file if you'd want to. That would be easy. So for this one, let's delete the back button layer, and we're going to set it up. I'm just going to pause the movie so you don't have to watch it, but I'll set it up like we did the first one. Okay, I went ahead and got all this set up, so you didn't have to watch that part again. We actually don't really need the labels for this method, really. We don't particularly really need it. So what we're going to do for this is we can do all of this in one frame. Now that you might wonder how that's going to happen, and I will show you. What we're going to do is we're going to turn this big image into a movie clip. Now a movie clip is nothing more than a timeline, an additional time, or it's a movie clip has its own timeline. So we can go inside the movie clip and access a different timeline, and you'll see how we'll use this. So right now I'm just going to select this image that is on stage here. It's just a JPEG. It's not actually a symbol yet. We're going to modify, convert to symbol, and we're going to make this one a movie clip. And we're going to call this our large images, like that. Now this is going to hold all of our large images. Now it's a movie clip. If you look in the properties, it says movie clip, and we can actually give this a name, which we'll want to do. So like I said, I like to name it something different than what the movie clip is named. So for the instance name, why don't we just call it My Images? To go into it and get to its timeline, you can actually just double click that image, and you'll see right here that we are now inside scene 1, but inside large images. And we have a fresh timeline starting with frame 1. Now here is where I might have some labels. So in frame 1, let's have image 1. Frame 20, right click, insert blank keyframe, image 2, and then let's go to 40, right click, insert blank keyframe, image 3, and we'll go to 60 and insert a frame just so we can read it. And in frame 1 we have our large image. I'm going to alt click to just duplicate that down the line. Right click here, insert frame, and then I will swap these bitmaps like I did before. Swap, change it to 2, swap, change this to 3. There we go. So now this actually looks kind of similar to how we did the first one. The difference is this movie clip now just contains our large images only. We've given those a name. We can name this layer if we want large images. And that's pretty much how we want to set that up. Now we have to go back to our main timeline. And this has our movie clip. All we want to do is when we click one of these buttons, we want to be able to navigate within the timeline of this movie clip. So we're not going to navigate on our main timeline at all. We're just going to have one frame. But when we click these buttons, we're going to navigate inside the movie clips timeline. So first what we have to do is we have to, because I started over, we have to convert these. Actually, I have the buttons already in my library from when I did it before, but I would convert those to button symbols so we can use code with them. I'll just kind of drag those out there. 1, 2, and 3. So now all we have to do is add the code to make all this work. So go to the action script for this layer. We'll go to actions. We'll leave the stop in there. Let's see. Let's kind of do this the hard way first. So, oh yeah, one thing I need to do too is these have to have instance names. So the library name is button 1, but it needs to be called, the instance name needs to be button 1 or btn1. This one needs to be btn2. This one needs to be btn3. Alright, so now let's go back to that code. So we have btn1 add event listener. When that happens, we have btn1 go. We can leave those same functions. Now the only difference is we now need to go to and stop on this image's timeline. So remember we named that image, let's see, my images is that instance name. So we need to go my images, whoops, go to and stop. Here we go. We go my images. So we call that movie clip, put a period, and then we say go to and stop images 1. So what that does is actually will look in the my images timeline instead of the main timeline. So let's test this movie and see. So it's all kind of moving now, and I believe that's because, let's see. Ah, yes. We also, this timeline is going to run independently of the main timeline. So we actually need to go in, add some action script for that timeline. And we need to stop it because it hasn't been told to stop, so it just runs. and we want it to stop until we tell it to do something. So now let's test. Alright, now we're stopped, and this should now function. Click on the thumbnail, and it's just navigating to different spots within the image's timeline. Now this might get a little bit tricky, but there's one more way where we can actually make our code more efficient if you're interested in seeing another way. So what we're going to do is we're going to rename these buttons. I'm going to call it image 1, image 2, and image 3. And this is going to be similar to what we have in this movie clip's timeline, image 1, image 2, image 3. And you'll see why in just a second. We want those to match up. What we can do is we can go to our main code here again, and instead of having three different functions, we could actually just have a function that we'll call btn press, like button press. And for each of those buttons, if you click any of those buttons, it's going to call the same function. So this can save, this is less code that we have to deal with. You can imagine if you had 50 thumbnail images, that's 50 functions you won't have to write. So we're going to erase these other functions. We won't need those anymore. And we're going to give this function name button press. And we're going to go my images, that movie clip, we're going to go to and stop in there still. But instead of naming the exact label, we are going to do a little trick here. We're going to put event target name. Essentially what that's going to do, the event target is the name, or the event target name is the name, the instance name of the button that was pressed. So we called our instance names image 1, image 2, image 3. So if image 2 button is pressed, then it's going to go to and stop the name, which is image 2. Well, that just happens to be the name of the label that we used inside of my images movie clip. So that lets us use one function for all three of these buttons. Hopefully that makes sense. So we can test this movie, and we have some problems here. Let's see what those compiler. Access of undefined property event. So I messed something up somewhere. Let's take a look. Oh yes, I see what I did. It's not recognized as these buttons anymore because I'm not using those names anymore. So these needs to be image 1, image 2, and these are the button names now, image 3. Let's see, what else? One more issue here. Oh, I see what I did here. I used a capital event here. That actually has to be consistent here. So if I test that, that should do the trick. Now you might see it sometimes, like this text can actually be called anything. You might see it lowercase, and in which case that would be lowercase as well. And we'd be fine. So that's just showing you another example of how, whether it's capitalized or not can make a big difference. And it's very easy to get these kinds of errors sometimes. But anyways, that's a multitude of methods that you can use to create galleries. You might just stick with the first method presented if you're just getting started. It'll be the easiest way to go, but you might delve into some of these more advanced methods if you are feeling adventurous. All right, thank you.